Thank you very much for those kind words. Yeah, I'm Jonathan Stevens, Comvita Innovations, based at Auckland, doing quite a bit of plantation research as well as general product research. Honey quality issues seem to rear their ugly head quite often for me. So plantations today. I did a talk here last year, and a lot of these faces are familiar. So I hope you can just pick up on the theme from last year. This presentation today really is just getting you up to date of where we are and where we're going with it. So these were the first partners under the scheme, right? There was Comvita, there was the Tweedale Apiaries, we had Manuka Carbon, which is a company that works in Wanganui, and the Ritterfords, Arborex Industries down in southern Wairarapa. Since then, we've got significant additional partners, and we've been back to the government under the PGP scheme, and the process has been extended and enlarged a little bit. So we've brought in partners like Landcorp, who have a significant amount of land throughout New Zealand, and we're certainly extending the geographical range of what we're doing through the South Island, not to the same extent as what we've done in the North Island, but it will probably come in due course. We've obviously got Hawke's Bay Regional Council. You've just heard a big presentation on Lake Duterra trials and where we're going with that. That's a huge opportunity to roll out into this marginal hill country, erosion-prone country. And we very recently, in the last few weeks, Te Tumu Paira, the Māori trustee, have come on board, large cash injection forecast for the scheme with MPI's agreement. So again, it's a matter of embracing all the interested parties that come in under this program. And yes, there is plant breeding, etc. There are significant plant trials. There were a few things that have been discussed today, and I left my piece of paper on the ground over there. But there was one, flowering times. I think from all the data and all the plants that I've seen, when we've been moving them around, I think flowering times are pretty constant. So you can do some pretty clever things with flowering, and I've actually got a bit of an example here today. So if you take an early flowering variety from somewhere and you put it somewhere else in a cooler environment, it will still flower early. Now you've got to be a wee bit careful. You don't want it to flower too early so the bees won't work, but you can extend your flowering periods, and that's what we're always looking to do on our trial blocks. And so instead of your Manuka crop being 4 to 6 weeks, we're looking for 3 months flowering on Manuka. And that 3 months flowering, it has to be supplemented with good pollen sources, because Manuka is not a good pollen source for bees. If you leave bees on Manuka too long, Manuka pollen alone, the hives go backwards. So yeah, breeding. So you put it all together, and you have to assess an awful lot of things in an awful lot of different sites. So you generate a matrix of the same plants in a range of sites. So you're comparing breeding lines within a block, and then you have the same breeding lines, same plants at a whole lot of other blocks, and then you can generate a model on what grows best where and what will produce best honey where. DHA potential is really important, and that was raised today. It is really important. That's what drives the value of the honey, but you have to know how the cultivars are going to perform in the field, and there is differences how they perform in the field compared to how they will perform in glasshouse or common garden experiments. So that's kind of what all this is about. So we're assessing growth rates. How fast do the different lines grow? What's their disease resistance? And there's a nasty little kick in that bit about disease resistance. We really look at sooty mould, because that can be a bit of a problem on establishing leptospermum in New Zealand. But you've got to also factor in myrtle rust. Okay, myrtle rust is a guava rust that came out of South America, went into Florida, went to Hawaii, went to Australia, and hasn't got here yet. It is a problem, seen to be a problem in Australia. There's a lot of Myrtaceae species. The models that MPI did are all doom and gloom for New Zealand. I'm not sure yet how susceptible our populations of Leptospermum scoparium are to myrtle rust. We are going to screen, our favoured lines are going to be screened at the University of Sydney, whose agriculture department has an active screening program for this particular disease. So in other words, we send them seed, they grow them, and then they really hit them hard, hit the plants hard with the disease and see whether it will wipe them out. If our plants are pretty resistant to the rust in that very warm glasshouse environment in Australia with an awful load of infection, in New Zealand the rust probably won't be that much of a risk. I'm inclined to err on the side of that I don't think myrtle rust is as much of a problem as what everyone says it is. I may be wrong. We need to test it and find out. So yeah, disease resistant, that's sort of one of the things, when you're establishing a long-term plantation, you don't want to plant a whole lot of plants that will fall over if myrtle rust comes in. I want to plant things that are resistant if it does come in. But I also want good DHA potential and good growth rates and all that, and hardiness as well. So flowering period, yep, early, middle, late. We want extended flowering periods. We do want plenty of DHA, but that's got to be stable in the environment that they're grown, and of course hardiness. How hardy are the plants for their particular environment. I have had trials fall over because I've taken, smallish trials where I've taken a seed line and put it into an environment that's too hard on that particular seed line, and within 3 years I've virtually got nothing left. So that's not the sort of thing that we want to do on a commercial scale. That's what happens in trials, and that's where we want to keep those sort of mistakes. So at the moment, this is just some indication. Those bottom ones are, South Island ones are Landcorp. And that's something that people can talk about here, is irrigated trials. Yeah, that's an irrigated site where we want to use Leptospermum as windbreaks. And someone else was talking about smaller windbreaks, not as high, the irrigators go across today. So yeah, our Landcorp partners really see that as a problem going forward, the removal of windbreaks in Canterbury. Mount Hamilton is a very cold and hospitable site. I think we've got about 10 hectares there, Barry, and we had snow in October on those cultivars, but they haven't done too badly so far. So what we chose is reasonably tough, but again, it's trials. It might work, it might not. Plenty in the North Island. What we do with all of this is we assess them all. So we pull all the data back in, and how much is it growing, how much flower is it carrying, how much nectar is being produced. That was another question. Do we look at nectar? Yes, we do. We look at what's in the nectar. How rich is the nectar between different varieties on different sites. So that sort of thing, yeah. Pull all that growth, flowering, and the second big part is getting the apiaries onto these blocks. So it's not just how the plants are doing, how is it best to get the apiary in, how many hives can we carry to a plantation developing, and over time measure, and this is what I keep pushing on these blocks at the moment, over time measure the change in the honey. So Tutera, for instance, our Hawke's Bay honey company, Comvita honey company, is Kiwi Bee Hawke's Bay, is on that block, and I have from Tutera, I know how much honey came off the sites. I think there's 3 sites on it. I know what the total weight is. I have samples of that honey so I can test it for UMF activity, etc. Because that really drives value, obviously. But I also know I have the Manuka. When the Manuka was being harvested, the Manuka's flowering, the bees are working the Manuka. I have that honey. I know how many kilos of that. So over time, I can plot how the Manuka harvest changes and increases as the plants grow. And there's a good example of that later on in the Ahu Valley. But Tutera is topical at the moment because we just had a presentation on it. So yes, there are beehives on it. They're mostly working pasture. There's a window when the plants, the Manuka that has been planted is flowering, and when that is harvested by the bees, we measure how good it is. Is it quite good, very good, or is it diluted out by all the clover and stuff? So all of these things we're trying to factor in on each block. Oh yes, plantations continue to grow. It's about 750 hectares, I think. That's probably pretty up to date. Good flower density on that cultivar. Those sort of things come out of the breeding program. So you're breeding plants that have exceptional floral density, that have good nectar. But that's a Bay of Plenty trial. That thing has to go out into the harder country because it's no use just going straight ahead on that. Right, this is something that I showed you all last year. This is a Wanganui block. The endemic indigenous Manuka in the Wanganui, it's a variety, it's a myrtifolium offshoot, and it doesn't have that much DHA potential in it. It just doesn't have it. So if you get a very good Manuka honey, you're lucky to get about 3,000 milligrams per kilo DHA in a good honey from those harvests. And when we look at the drums coming in, it always sits sort of on that line. Now, in that country, we've put in quite a big plantation with a beekeeper in that area, and it's been going for a few years. And last year, I had that data that came out. The honey was being analysed in 2013, so it was from last year's honey. And I said at that meeting here, I said, well, I suspect that it'll probably improve over time. And I said, that's it flowering this spring. As the purity improves, the DHA will increase, and you know that DHA drives value in Manuka honey. And this year, the samples that came in from the beekeeper about 2 weeks ago, or 3 or 4 weeks ago, that's in there. Okay. So we're losing that rubbishy stuff. There's much more flower. The Manuka is bigger. There's much more flower. The bees are working it, and we're getting clustered up here. I'd be much happier if it's up there, but it's not yet. It's there. It'll continue to move up that line because that is how that variety behaves. So what that indicates, and that does flower earlier. It does not flower when the endemic one, the local one, flowers. The local one flowers in about December into January. That flowers in October. It's very, very separate. Quite clear. The beekeeper's got about 100 hives on that 60 hectares, and he's delighted. Not surprisingly. Why do we spend so much time on trying to do this? Because the value of Manuka honey is driven by how pure, how good it is, how much dihydroxyacetone it had when it was formed, and how much MgO forms as the honey matures. And wholesale values, well, that's out of date now, that's about $65. But as you go better, it's worth an awful lot more. It puts an awful lot more money back into the beekeepers' businesses. Local community gets a bonus, and at the moment we're currently developing joint ventures on the East Coast to really put the skills, the knowledge, the money back into these local communities, driven by Manuka honey. And that's probably why I'm quite passionate about these quality standards and trying to protect this industry, because it could fall over if we aren't careful as an industry. Right, well, okay, contrasting unimproved on the left, improved on the right. Yeah, it's pretty obvious what we're looking at there. Makes a huge difference. And if you're interested, trials, they're not cheap. I mean, all the trials we put in cost roughly $2,000 a hectare. We do 1,100 stems. The plant cost isn't as 35 cents a stem for plants, but there's a lot of land prep and often fencing, pest control. It's not cheap to set up, but going forward, John Burke, unfortunately he couldn't be here, but and I didn't put the financial forecast slides in. You saw them last year. Going forward, there's considerable potential to generate good income off marginal erosion-prone lands using this system, I would suspect. All right, thank you.